Welcome to The Debate. I'm Megan.
And I'm Terry.
So think about the apocalypse for a second. Like, when we imagine the end of the world, we usually picture something, loud and chaotic, right?
Oh, definitely. Like a sky full of alien lasers or massive asteroid strikes, something like that.
Exactly. Or, a prolonged global war. We kind of expect the mechanism of our destruction to be as massive as the destruction itself.
Yeah, it just makes sense to our brains.
Right. But sometimes the end of the world starts with the smallest, quietest motion imaginable. Just a single finger in a freezing, isolated room pressing down on a button to close an electrical circuit.
Right. A simple, almost imperceptible mechanical motion. Just open or closed. Exactly. But when we look at the source material of the three-body problem, that simple mechanical action becomes the epicenter of this massive moral gray area. Oh, totally. It's the core of the whole thing. Yeah. We have these two very different individuals separated by 4 light-years of cold, silent space. First, there's Ye Wenjie. She's a human astrophysicist stationed at this remote, top-secret military installation on Earth called Red Coast Base. Right.
And she pushes a button to send a transmission that essentially invites an alien civilization to our world.
Which is a huge deal.
Huge. And then on the flip side, there is the Trisolaran Listener. He's sitting in this lonely, distant extraterrestrial outpost known as Post 1379. And he pushes a button to warn Earth away.
Right, the exact opposite message.
Exactly. So today, we are looking at these parallel actions. The central question we're tackling is, are these two characters essentially cosmic twins? Does the fact that they make the exact same choice to send a forbidden, civilization-altering transmission mean they serve the exact same narrative and philosophical purpose?
Or, on the other hand, do their fundamentally opposite motivations, Ye Wenjie's profound despair and hatred for human cruelty, contrasted with the listener's awe and really self-sacrificing love for a distant paradise, make them entirely different entities?
Right. And I take the position that they absolutely are echoes of each other. They're two sides of the same coin. Both are profoundly alienated outcasts. Both have recognized the deep, systemic, and perhaps terminal flaws in their own species. And ultimately, both make a unilateral, basically godlike decision for their entire worlds. To me, they prove that extreme, crushing isolation leads to the exact same cosmic consequence.
I hear you, but
The universe does not care about their internal motivations. It only registers their structural symmetry. They are identical catalysts for everything that follows.
yeah, I'm going to have to disagree there. I come at it from a completely different angle. While the physical act of pushing that button is perfectly mirrored, the moral weight of their actions is diametrically opposed.
How so? The result is the same.
The result, maybe, but not the soul behind it. Ye Wenjie is acting from deep, unhealed trauma. She is actively seeking to destroy, or at least forcibly conquer, her own world out of a sense of dark revenge and despair.
Right. She's definitely hurting.
Yeah, she is. But the listener, however, acts out of pure altruism. He is willing to sacrifice his own life to protect a beautiful world he has only just discovered. That makes them fundamentally different in my eyes. The act is the same, sure, but one is an executioner and the other is a savior.
Okay. Well, let's start by tracing how they actually got to that button in the first place. Because, they didn't just wake up one day and decide to alter the fate of the universe.
No, definitely not.
To understand why they pushed it, we first have to look at the mechanics of how their respective societies pushed them to the brink. I think we both agree they are complete outsiders, but the mechanism of their isolation is key here.
It is, and I think that distinction is vital. Ye Wenjie's alienation is born of active, brutal malice. Her trauma isn't just, a vague sadness. It is deeply, intimately personal and violent.
It is incredibly visceral. Yeah.
Exactly. During the Cultural Revolution, she literally watches her father, a brilliant physics professor, get beaten to death by Red Guards on a public stage.
Right.
And it's not just strangers hurting her. She is betrayed by her own mother, who stands there and laughs crazily as her husband's blood drips onto the ground.
Yeah, that scene is just, it's heavy.
It's horrific. And then later, when she is sent to that brutal logging camp in the Greater Canyon Mountains, she is framed by a reporter she trusted. She helps him write a letter about the environmental destruction she's witnessing, and he just throws her under the bus to save himself.
Classic betrayal.
Right. And she is thrown into a freezing prison and tortured. Humanity goes out of its way to hunt her down and hurt her over and over again.
I don't disagree with the severity of her trauma at all. I mean, it's absolute nightmare fuel.
Yeah.
But contrast that with the mechanics of the Trisolaran Listener's life. He doesn't experience active malice. What he experiences is systemic apathy.
Okay, but apathy is...
Just hear me out. He lives in a society plagued by 3 erratic suns, right? Where survival is literally the only metric of value. If you're listening to this, you might recall that Trisolarians literally dehydrate themselves, like turning their bodies into flat, lifeless husks, just to survive their planet's chaotic climate eras.
Right, the chaotic eras. It's a brutal existence.
Because of this harsh reality, their society is hyper-utilitarian. Emotion is considered a fatal flaw. So the listener sits in his quiet listening post, just staring at static for years. The only threat hanging over him is that if he loses his job, if his post is deemed obsolete, he will be forcibly dehydrated and burned as fuel for the state.
Which is terrifying in its own right, sure.
It is. His society isn't maliciously torturing him. It simply does not care if he exists. Ye Wenjie is a victim of humanity's burning hatred. The listener is a victim of Trisolaris's freezing indifference.
That's a really vivid way to put it. Burning hatred versus freezing indifference.
Exactly.
But I would frame the psychological result differently. I mean, active malice and systemic apathy.
They're just 2 different flavors of the exact same poison.
Are they, though?
I really think so. It's exactly like freezing to death versus burning to death. The method of temperature exchange differs, sure, but what actually happens to the body? The core system shut down, the organs fail, and the result is completely identical. Both characters reach a point of complete and utter exhaustion with their respective species. The mechanism of the trauma doesn't matter nearly as much as the psychological death it produces.
But exhaustion from what? That's where the paths diverge for me. Ye Wenjie is exhausted by cruelty. The listener is exhausted by the mere act of survival.
True, but look at the logical conclusions they reach based on that exhaustion. Ye Wenjie doesn't just hate humanity, she diagnoses it. She looks at the deforestation, the political violence, the betrayals, and she basically treats humanity like an autoimmune disease.
I mean, she's not totally wrong about the symptoms.
Right. She realizes the body is aggressively attacking itself, and no internal medicine is going to work. She concludes that humanity cannot achieve a moral awakening from within. It requires a total cosmic organ transplant.
Okay, a cosmic organ transplant. I like that.
Thanks. Now, look at the listener. He stands before his princeps and explicitly says, "I am tired of Trisolaris." He tells his leader that their civilization has absolutely nothing in its life and spirit except the grim, endless fight for survival. He is just as done with his people as Ye is with hers. The psychological void they fall into before pressing that button is completely symmetrical.
I'm sorry, I just don't buy that the void is symmetrical. Let me tell you why.
Go for it.
Exhaustion might be the baseline condition, sure, but intent is the absolute dividing line. It's about what they actively hope to achieve when they finally laid their fingers on that transmit switch. We have to look at the actual data they sent.
Okay, let's look at it.
Ye Wenjie sends her message explicitly stating, "Come here, I will help you conquer this world. Our civilization is no longer capable of solving its own problems. We need your force to intervene." I mean, she is actively condemning humanity to subjugation or worse, destruction.
Well, she does that because her background as a scientist leads her to believe intervention is the only cure.
But she's doing it as a form of cosmic revenge. Now look at the listener's broadcast. He receives Ye's message depicting Earth as a paradise, a stable world with one sun, a predictable climate, green forests, oceans.
A literal utopia compared to Trisolaris.
Exactly. And what does he send back? Do not answer, do not answer, do not answer. He knows perfectly well that sending this warning will doom his own desperate species, a species that absolutely needs a new home to survive.
He does.
He does it solely to protect a vibrant world he has never even seen. One presses the button out of a desire for destruction, the other out of self-sacrificing love. You simply cannot call them parallel tragedies when one is acting to extinguish life and the other is acting to preserve it.
I see why you think that, and it's a beautiful sentiment. Let me push back on this idea of pure altruism versus pure malice. If you look closely at the mechanics of the text, the listener's motives aren't entirely selfless, and honestly, Ye Wenjie's aren't entirely malicious.
How on earth is the listener not selfless? He risks being dehydrated and tossed into an incinerator for a world he doesn't even know.
Right. But look at what he admits when he is finally caught. When the princeps asks him why he did it, the listener doesn't just give some noble speech about saving Earth. He says, so that my life isn't wasted.
Well, yeah, but
Think about his reality. He was facing unemployment and inevitable death as fuel. He realized that if he just faded away into the Trisolarian machine, his entire existence meant absolutely nothing. He actively chose to send that message because he wanted a single chance to make his own, and I'm quoting the text here, humble life glow. He essentially used Earth as a tool to give his own existence meaning.
okay, but wanting your life to mean something by saving an entire civilization is still a fundamentally noble act, though. It doesn't negate the grace of what he did.
It is noble, sure, but it's a projection. Just like Ye Wenjie's act is a projection. If you're listening to this, you might think Ye Wenjie is just a straight-up villain who wanted to watch the world burn. But her actions were driven by a very specific, if, tragically flawed, scientific deduction.
The whole higher morality thing.
Yes, she didn't just push a button on a whim. She spent years figuring out how to use the sun as a massive amplifier. She realized she could bounce radio waves off the sun's internal stratification to broadcast her signal across the galaxy. I mean, it was a brilliant, calculated scientific triumph.
Oh, her brilliance isn't up for debate. She's a genius.
Right. And she used that triumph because she genuinely believed that a technologically superior species must inherently possess a higher morality. Science had taught her that advanced systems are more stable. She thought she was saving the world by bringing in an advanced civilization to fix our broken society.
A forced fixing.
True, but both of these isolated individuals are projecting their own desperate fantasies onto an alien race. The listener projects a flawless, peaceful paradise onto Earth. Ye Wenjie projects a flawless moral authority onto Trisolaris. They are both using an alien civilization as a therapeutic tool to solve their own internal spiritual crises.
That's a compelling way to frame it. I'll give you that. But have you considered the reality of what happens when those therapeutic fantasies crash into the real world?
What do you mean?
This is where the idea of them being cosmic twins completely breaks down for me. If they both projected their fantasies onto the stars, we have to look at how they handled the physical reality of their treason once the button was actually pushed.
I actually think the aftermath highlights the structural irony of their actions perfectly. I mean, look at where they end up. They are perfect mirrors in their society's eyes.
Are they?
Yes. Ye Wenjie eventually becomes the spiritual leader of the Earth Trisolaris organization. She is literally the commander-in-chief of a rebel faction, elevated to the status of ultimate traitor to all of humanity.
Right.
And the listener? He is hauled before the princeps and literally labeled the greatest criminal in all the cycles of Trisolaran civilization. They are both elevated to the pinnacle of treason by their respective species.
Okay, I hear that, but look at the actions they take to secure that treason. To protect her secret, what does Ye Wenjie do? She realizes that her husband Yang Weining and the base commissar Lei Zhicheng have discovered the unauthorized transmission. So she murders them.
Well, yes, she.
And she doesn't just shoot them in the heat of the moment. She sabotages the grounding wire on the equipment. When the two men are dangling over a freezing cliff edge to fix it, she coldly takes a hacksaw and cuts the rope, dropping her own husband to his death. Her so-called higher morality is completely corrupted by her trauma. She becomes the very monster she supposedly hates.
Yes, the murder of her husband is brutal. It's a calculated, terrifying act. I won't defend the morality of it.
Exactly. Now compare that to the listener. After his unauthorized transmission is discovered, he doesn't murder his colleagues to cover his tracks. He accepts his punishment peacefully.
Because he didn't have a choice.
Let me finish. The Princeps actually decides not to kill him immediately. Because Trisolaran society is so focused on psychological warfare, the Princeps tells the listener he is going to let him live just so the listener can watch Earth lose all hope when the invasion fleet arrives.
Right, to break his spirit.
And the listener accepts this. He doesn't fight back. He doesn't lash out. He is content that he at least tried to save the paradise he imagined. Ye Wenjie's act was the embodiment of a victim's dark revenge, actively perpetuating the cycle of violence. The listener's act remained a beacon of grace, stopping the cycle of violence within himself.
I have to push back on that, Terry, because you're treating Ye's murders as separate from the initial button press. I would argue they are the inevitable structural consequence of it.
How is murder an inevitable structural consequence?
Because once that button is pressed, the human scale of morality completely collapses. She is now operating on planetary math. Yes, it's brutal that she cuts that rope, but it actually proves my point. The murders are just a tragic, localized extension of the planetary betrayal she had already committed. And the fact that the listener didn't have to murder anyone to cover his tracks, that is merely circumstantial.
Circumstantial? How so?
Because he was caught almost immediately. The Trisolaran surveillance state is absolute. There was no rope to cut, no secret to protect, because the state knew the second he hit transmit.
If Ye Wenjie had lived in a society where she was instantly caught, she wouldn't have had to cut for rope either.
I disagree that it's just circumstantial. I really think it speaks to their core character. Look at what happens years later. Ye Wenjie survives and goes on to fund and lead a fanatical cult that actively wants to help aliens wipe out humanity.
The ETO, yeah.
She literally stands in her ruined cafeteria, raises her fist, and shouts, "Eliminate human tyranny." She leans into the destruction. She wants the fire. The listener, on the other hand, sits quietly in his cell, observing. He doesn't want anyone to burn. Wait, but don't you see the profound irony there? Ye Wenjie shouts, "Eliminate human tyranny," precisely because she has experienced that tyranny firsthand. Her betrayal is an attempt to force an evolution she believes we are incapable of making ourselves.
Even if it means wiping us out.
Right, but the listener's betrayal is an attempt to halt an invasion he believes his people have no right to make. One is pulling the trigger, the other is trying to jump in front of the bullet. But to understand why their intent ultimately doesn't matter, we have to look at the physics of the universe they inhabit.
You're talking about the dark forest theory.
Exactly. If you're listening and aren't familiar with it, imagine the universe is a dark forest full of armed, silent hunters.
Right, cosmic sociology.
Yeah, if you see someone else in the forest, you can't know if they are peaceful or hostile. And more importantly, you can't know if they think you are peaceful or hostile. The chain of suspicion is endless. So the only logical, mathematically safe action is to shoot first. Any broadcast that reveals your location is a death sentence.
Right, the universe is inherently hostile to life that makes itself known. I get that.
So mathematically, in the grand equation of that dark forest, pulling the trigger and jumping in front of the bullet do the exact same thing. They light a match in the dark. They reveal coordinates to the cosmos. The universe doesn't care if you press the button out of love or out of hate.
A beacon is a beacon.
Exactly. A beacon is a beacon. The physical act of turning on the flashlight overrides whatever was in your heart when you flipped the switch. The universe treats a desperate plea for intervention and a desperate warning as the exact same cosmic trigger.
I understand the macro-level physics of it. The dark forest is unforgiving. But, if we reduce these characters only to their physical inputs, to the mere act of pressing a button and lighting a match in the forest, we lose the entire human or, alien element that makes the story compelling in the first place.
I don't think we lose it. I just think it's dwarfed by the scale.
But the text itself cares. The narrative spends chapters upon chapters delving into Ye's past, into the blood on the stage during the Cultural Revolution, into the destruction of the ancient forests in Inner Mongolia. It does this precisely so we understand the terrifying depth of her wound.
Which is incredible writing, yes.
And it spends agonizing time in post-1379, so we understand the crushing, suffocating weight of Trisolaran survivalism. To say they are two sides of the same coin diminishes the terrifying, distinctly human fact that Ye Wenjie chose to doom us.
I would argue it doesn't diminish it at all. It elevates it. By making them parallel figures, the narrative shows us a terrifying psychological principle. It tells us that no matter where you are in the universe, whether you are a human on a green planet or a Trisolarian under 3 burning suns, a conscious being pushed to the absolute limit of alienation will eventually lash out against their own kind. It suggests that betrayal is a universal law, just as reliable and predictable as gravity.
Well, I think we're going to have to remain in productive tension on this one.
Fair enough.
As we wrap up this discussion, I still firmly maintain that while their actions perfectly mirror one another, their souls do not. Ye Wenjie operates from the deep, festering shadows of trauma to invite an invasion. She conflates technological power with moral superiority, and in doing so, she becomes the ultimate victim who transitions into the ultimate perpetrator.
Right.
The Trisolaran Listener acts from a spark of pure, self-sacrificing love to protect a paradise he knows he will never see. They might have both pushed a button that changed the universe, but they are fundamentally different entities. Intent matters, even if the universe doesn't care.
And from my perspective, the core tragedy of the material is precisely that the universe makes no distinction between a soul full of trauma and a soul full of love. They are cosmic twins, profoundly alienated individuals who press a button to betray their deeply flawed species.
It's a bleak outlook.
Whether seeking to give their life meaning or force an evolutionary leap, are ultimately rendered secondary to the mechanics of the cosmos. A beacon is a beacon.
It really does leave you grappling with that tension between what we intend to do and the physical reality of what we actually do.
It does. It shows how the exact same physical act can be driven by entirely opposite corners of the conscious experience, yet yield the exact same devastation. There is so much more to explore in this material regarding how morality functions on a cosmic scale, and we'll leave it to you to form your own conclusions on whether the intent changes the crime. But it all comes back to that one terrifyingly simple motion in the dark, the choice to close a circuit.
Open or closed?
The press of a button.